Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the first book in the Mistborn trilogy, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. So in this review, I'm going to go over a basic description of the story and the world and the magic, and then we're going to go over some of the pros and cons about the story, and then wrap it all up with my final thoughts. And with that being said, remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and let's begin. So, The Final Empire is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson, and it takes place on the world of Scadrial. Scadrial is a world much like Earth, but it is different in multiple ways. So the planet is covered in this dense layer of fog and smoke and ash and stuff, to the point where it blocks out the sun mostly, and all the plants on the planet are some version of brown, and like there's no green or anything like that, and ash constantly falls from the sky. And at night, the world, pretty much all the way up to about probably 6 feet high, the world gets covered in mists. So it's like Earth, but like probably about 1,000 times more depressing. And it's ruled, and the area we're in, the country, I think country or entire continent, it mostly takes place in a city called Luthadel, and the ruler of all of this area, the central dominance, and all of it actually, is the immortal ruler called the Lord Ruler. You know, very original. He was basically the bad guy, and he won the whole conflict or whatever 1,000 years ago, and he's been ruling everything ever since. Also, in this world, humankind is split into two separate races, more or less: the noblemen and the ska. The nobles are always more or less taller and more intelligent and are less fertile. They have less children and stuff like that. But the ska are always like shorter, more hardy, and like generally less intelligent and far more fertile. They tend to have more children. So like it becomes common in the thought of a lot of the ska that like the differences are specifically like why they're enslaved and stuff like that. Like it feels too specific. It comes back later, but so in this world separated by the sky and the nobles and dealing with all this other stuff, there's a magic system called allomancy, right? In allomancy, there are basically two types of users. There's a Mistborn and a Misting. A Mistborn is someone who has the ability to eat any of the 10 different types of metals that give specific magical abilities. So like steel allows you to push against other metals, and iron allows you to pull against other metals. So it's kind of like that each metal does something different. And a Mistborn can access all 10 different types of powers, whereas a Misting can only access one. So say you're a pewter misting, you can consume the metal pewter and it gives you enhanced strength and stuff like that. So, but if you're a Mistborn, you can use both pewter and steel or iron, and so you can use all of the different metals. The powers are also fairly segregated between the people too. It's believed that only the nobles can become Mistborns or Mistings, while the Sky aren't, able to. But there's been so much interbreeding over the last 1,000 years that there's a lot of Mistborns that are like born as Sky, because they're like, when they are born, they don't get to live as noble people. They're typically tossed to with the slaves or whatever, because it's always some kind of crap like that. But so there's the main, our main characters are half sky, half noble, and they have these abilities, but they obviously are fighting on the side of the sky. So the main players in this story is this crew. There's multiple different crews, and they call them thieving crews. So in this thieving crew, pretty much everybody in the crew are mistings. They all have access to one of the 10 different metals, and they can burn the metals and use them and produce some type of magical effect. And of course, that has influenced who they are, and it's influenced the way they see the world and the way they do stuff and all that. Like there's one metal that you can use, and it allows you to soothe emotions, like calm people down. So there's a character in the crew that like does that a lot, and it makes him like a very smooth talker and all this kind of stuff. And there's just other stuff. It's all that kind of stuff, right? So it creates this very cool situation for a heist, because everybody you need that has a special skill, it's a very explicit special skill description. So, our main character is this former street urchin named Vin. She was basically raised by her older brother after her mother went crazy and tried to kill her, like after killing her sister. So, like, she killed her sister. So, like, she got raised by her brother and on the streets and stuff, and her brother basically taught her that people are going to betray you always. Like, just pretty much always wait for the other shoe to drop because it will always happen. You will always be betrayed. Never trust anybody and all this stuff. So he hammered all this stuff into her and like traumatized her and stuff. And then she ends up a part of this thieving crew, and then some stuff goes down. She gets separated from them and she gets recruited by the main crew of the story. So when Vin is recruited into the thieving crew, Kelsier starts to take her under his wing and trains her as a Mistborn because he's been training in his powers for about 3 years now. So he's training her. And it's more than just, having found this street urchin, helping her out and like training her and stuff and taking her under his wing. He's training her specifically because he knows that she will be a good part of the crew and help with their plan. Because they have this big plan that they've been basically working on since before they found her and stuff. And the plan is to overthrow the government and like overthrow the Lord Ruler and like basically kill him and like free all the sky and like, do all that kind of stuff. So they wanted to recruit her because, her being half noble, she can pass as a noble person. So they recruited her so that she can go undercover and like learn some stuff about the nobles and, their high society and all that kind of stuff. So this story is very much a heist story along with a Pygmalion My Fair Lady kind of thing going on. So we've got, the crew that we got a mission and everybody's got their own special skill and like it all's got to come together and work together and like that kind of thing. So it's very Ocean's 11 and stuff like that. It's very much like that. But it's also My Fair Lady. Like you take this young girl who like, knows nothing about high society and all this stuff and, is a thief and, a street person and all this stuff. And then you have to put her all in, these fancy dresses and send her to balls and everything. And she's got to like learn society. And then of course, inevitably it, because this is it's kind of YA towards adult. It's an adult talking about younger people more or less, which is expected in my opinion. There is a love story. So during the whole My Fair Lady thing, Vin, gets a love interest and stuff. So that happens. So Brandon uses a lot of very familiar plot archetypes like the heist story and like a My Fair Lady and just like mentor and mentee kind of surrogate parent kind of relationship and all that stuff. He takes a lot of that stuff and then writes it in a very unique way, writes it, give it the Brandon style and stuff and make something that feels old and kind of tired feel new and unique. And I love it. I think it's so well done. I think it's a great intro to the series and a great intro to the genre. If you're not a big fantasy person, then the way this story is told will suck you right in and you'll get totally into it because it doesn't feel like cliche fantasy. Like I was saying, it's like a heist movie and like a My Fair Lady. So it'll probably even give you like some Inception vibes and stuff like that. So it's a great story. It's really well constructed. So with that being said, let's move on to the pros and cons. Let's start off with the cons. I had actually a lot of trouble finding cons for this book because it's so good. I don't know, at this point I'm probably just a Brandon Sanderson fanboy, so it's like chances of me finding legit negatives is like tough. So that, might have some influence. I'm probably biased, or admittedly biased, I'll say. But my first con actually was the entire slavery part of the ska. So as I've said before in previous videos, my first exposure to Brandon Sanderson was through Elantris. So I got so hyped about Elantris. I love this religious war kind of thing that was happening. And then like the idea that it's kind of real, but not real. Like they got it wrong because of their whole shard situation. But like I love all the stuff that was happening there. So I was desperately looking for like a sequel, something very similar to that when I found Mistborn. I just knew it was by Brandon. So like it was just on the list, period, because at that point I was already a fan. But every time I tried to start it, it just started off with that description of the sky and like how they're, slaves and stuff. And then the perspective of that noble guy who, wanted to like reward himself by raping a slave and stuff. Like, so that just starting off that when I had these other expectations, kind of, it turned me off so completely that I put it down multiple times before I came back to it. So I don't know if it's because like where I was at that time or just general life, like, because I get sick of that kind of stuff. I get sick of that kind of like slave representation and all this kind of stuff. It's overdone and it's way too prevalent in my media existence. So it rubbed me the wrong way initially. So it took me a couple of tries to get back into it. But when I got back into it and kind of pushed through that part and basically got to the point where Kelsier shows up and like talked to those people in, you know, their little hovel or whatever, that at that point I was hooked. Like when I got to that point, soon Kelsier shows up and I realized what's going to happen, like what's going on. Like the momentum right there is like I get hooked onto the back of a train and there was no letting go. Like that's kind of how it went from there. But in general, yes, that the trope and the cliche of like slavery as a method to illustrate why a society is bad and why a government should be overthrown and stuff. While I get that is a simple motivation to, you know, attach the character to say, yes, this whole society needs to be restructured or whatever, if not completely destroyed. So I understand that, but it's like, I'm kind of over it. Like I'm just basically over it. So yeah, that would be con number one. So let's move on to con number two. Con number two for me is going to have to be the romantic subplot. While I already mentioned that Brandon takes some tropes and some cliches and, you know, archetypes of stories and like twist them and make them better and cool and unique and stuff, it's like this one, he either wasn't able to twist it and make it cool enough for me, for my personal taste, or I just wasn't going to like super get into it anyway. Because it was the one of the few times that I felt the tropish nature of it, because it was almost immediately. Like Vin has to go do her My Fair Lady thing and start going to these balls and almost immediately finds this guy. And like, and you know, I'm not going to mention too much more about it, but like, it just felt, so of course this happened. Like, oh, of course that happened. Oh, this is, you know, it kind of felt like that. And I was like, okay, blah, blah, blah. Let's move through this. I'm more interested in her being a badass and helping overthrow the Lord Ruler and stuff like that. I don't care about, you know, some dude that likes her or something like that. Like, I just didn't care about it. But it's played well and it's not overbearing and it's not like, you know, like suffocating. It's not insufferable or anything like that. So it's forgivable, but it's just one of those things that I'm like, I could have done without. And that will bring us to con number 3. And as I said before, I struggled finding legit cons for this story because I really like Mistborn a lot, especially Era 1. I like it a lot. So my third con after scraping the bottom of the barrel, the third con that I was able to find for Mistborn is got to be the story structure. So let me explain what I mean by that. I finished the entire trilogy, and the entire trilogy itself is so beautifully tight and works so well as one complete story that I can almost feel the breaks. It almost feels like Brandon wrote the entire thing all the way out and then had to break it up as a trilogy to avoid releasing a, you know, 4,000 page book or something like that. So it feels to me like, even though this book has a perfect ending, has a great ending, and it feels complete and everything, it's like when, like in perspective of having read all 3 of them, it feels like, oh, okay, we cut it off here, and then like we cut it off here, and then it feels like that. That's me personally. And it's also kind of shallow because that just means that the trilogy itself is that much better. So like I said, bottom of the barrel, couldn't find a lot of cons. So let's move on to the pros now. All right, so pro number 1. Pro number 1 has to be like, as I've gone back and forth, I said it before, it's like the trope things and the, you know, cliche kind of stuff. So one of my actual pros is one of the bigger tropes. It's the mentor-student relationship. It's the surrogate daughter to Kelsier kind of thing. Like Vin is positioned to be, you know, or Kelsier is positioned to be Vin's surrogate parent because, you know, she didn't have any parent, you know, lost her parents at a young age, and her brother was terrible guardian and all this kind of stuff. And so like, and then the great mentor, you know, student relationship, him teaching her to be, you know, her powers as a Mistborn and all this kind of stuff. So I think that entire dynamic was done very well. It was understandable. Like, he wasn't just this perfect kind of figure and stuff, and she wasn't just this wide-eyed innocent. They like bump heads, and like he learned stuff from her and she learned stuff from him. Like, it was just really well written. So even though it is something that's been done, 100 million times in fantasy before, Brandon again shows that he can take something that's old and make it feel completely new by adding his unique style to it. And speaking of style, Brandon's writing style. It's basically a trope by now that I praise Brandon's writing style, but that is definitely pro number 2. So pro number 2 is Brandon's writing style. His style is so clean that it's like, it's been said that it's no style. It's been said by me probably 50 times or so that it's like a no style. And it's told, and it's like, it's not told in such a way that, you have to reinterpret it in your head to understand it in basic, like, modern English or anything like that. It's very contemporary, but it has, like, he uses idioms and things that are unique to that world, but you don't have to explain the idioms because contextually it's so perfect. It all makes sense. And the engagement of his writing, like I said, I had issues starting this book because of the way it started with the whole slavery thing, and it was just rubbing me the wrong way. But the moment we got into the characters that were important, because the beginning part, like the prologue stuff is awesome and all that, but that little beginning part, like, was a character that almost didn't matter at all. But then we get to the characters that Brandon wants you to care about, and then you're immediately hooked. Like, it took me, so it captivated me so completely. It completely took me. And so I praise his writing style, I praise his character development and his progression of story and his pacing so completely for all of that. So I'm wrapping all of that in to this pro and calling it writing style. So yeah, those are the big things I really like about Brandon's writing in general, not just with this book. So that's a huge pro, and it's probably applicable. Actually, it's definitely applicable through all of his writing. And speaking of stuff that's pretty much apparent throughout all of his writing is my third pro. So pro number 3 is going to be the magic system. So Brandon Sanderson is at this point, it's a trope in and of itself that he is basically a king of magic systems. Like, he even has, I don't know if you guys know, like, Brandon teaches, and he posts some of his class lectures online and stuff. And I was watching one about his magic systems, and he was talking about how, like, rules of the magic system are actually more interesting than the powers. And I'm like, that is so beautifully articulated, because I've always kind of had that in mind, like, stuff like, I know it's probably like, it's heavy to say because, it's Tolkien, but I never cared for the magic in Lord of the Rings, at least like Gandalf actually all of the magic, to be quite frankly, like, because it's such a soft magic system. It's very ill-defined. It's very, about the awe and wow and woo, it's all very much about that kind of stuff. So it just, to me, it's just, okay, whatever the plot needs to be done, a wizard did it. Like, it's quite literally the wizard did it trope, like, in personification. So it just, I never felt super attached to it. That's also why I really like superpower stuff, like superhero type stuff. Superheroes have a very hard, very rigid, rule-defined magic system because all their powers have specific limitations, come from source and all this kind of stuff. So I've always really liked that because you have to get past the limitations of the situation or a limitation of your knowledge or anything like that that'll hinder you just being OP versus having godlike power. You can just call down any spell or any magical wave and just do whatever. Like, so it's that kind of thing for me. And Brandon pulls that in perfectly to this magic system. So even Mistborn's having the ability to use all the different metals, which feels pretty damn overpowered, still is heavily limited because like he has Mistborns going up against Mistborns and like so they're completely evenly touched, but then there's a way to twist that and like get an edge over the other Mistborns and stuff. So but he uses the rules that he's created as a way to push the creativity of the magic. So it's like you have these rules, like, so the magic in and of itself is cool, right? But it's made so much cooler because he has these characters that have to be clever enough to figure out how to get past the limitations of what they can do. So it makes it that much better and it makes it that much more memorable, and it's so much more fun in that way. I also noticed that Brandon loves to let his characters fly, right? So in Stormlight, Kaladin, the Windrunners in general, they manipulate gravity so they can functionally fly. But he wanted to give, or, you know, chicken egg kind of thing. This came before Stormlight, but he wanted to give the Mistborns the ability to kind of fly so they can push and pull against metals, so they can push off of metal like they're, you know, hopping on the moon and stuff, but like probably much higher and stuff. And like, dude, so it's almost Spider-Man in a way. It's Spider-Man, Attack on Titan, you know, it gives me that flavor. So, but it's an interesting alternate to flying. So it's not just, oh, I can fly and go out and do stuff. So I like it. I love the limitations, and I love the creative expressions in the way that he's been able to make the characters just blow past the limits that he himself created. So it's just so well done. Just chef's kiss. Just perfect. So Brandon's world building is next level. His magic systems are perfect as always. His pacing is great. The story creation is good. The characters are well defined and well realized and well told. So I really can't recommend this book enough. Like, I think anybody that's a Sanderson fan will immediately recommend the Mistborn trilogy, especially Era 1. If you're new to fantasy, Mistborn is perfect. If you're new to like high epic fantasy, Mistborn is perfect. If you're new to an author that's going to throw some really random words and concepts that are literally deep space far away, this is a perfect intro, because this is a beautiful intro into the Cosmere. And I think Elantris is too also, but it's very early Cosmere. So this is a better intro to the Cosmere. I feel like even just if you kind of get over the story and aren't, you know, super impressed by the story, if you like things like connected universes and connected, you know, different things that just connect, kind of, you know, MCU kind of thing, then you'll kind of get a lot of those hints in here, and I think it's intriguing enough to kind of pull you down the rabbit hole that many of the people in the fandom has gleefully jumped down and have no intention of getting out of anytime soon. So yeah, so I definitely can't recommend this book enough. I definitely say pick it up if you haven't read it. Grab the audiobook, grab the graphic audio. Doesn't matter, just consume it, because at some point there's definitely going to be a movie series made of it, and I'm excited about it. So I'm gonna wrap this review up here. So remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't. And let me know what your favorite part about The Final Empire was, or the Mistborn trilogy in general. But if you go past the first book, you know, spoiler tag it in case anybody, you know, is just now joining the Mistborn train. So I will talk to you guys next time. Peace.